Okay, so in these lectures, I want to talk about Thomson's argument for abortion rights. And I think what makes Thomson's argument interesting is her strategy. And so Thomson's going to say this. Thomson will say, look, I'm not going to get in these personhood arguments. I'm not going to get in any of that. I'll just grant you, for the sake of argument, from the moment of conception, the fetus is a person and it has the same rights as you, me, or anybody else. Thomson doesn't believe that. She's like, I think it becomes a person at some point when I'm not sure. But for the sake of argument, I will give people on the pro-life side everything I think they want on this personhood question, and I will show you that nonetheless, there is still a right to an abortion. So she grants all this for the sake of argument. Thomson is very much, at least trying to, I said the principle of charity, she's trying to be very charitable. Say, look, I will give you everything you want in the way of premises. Fetus can be a person, can have the same rights as you, me, or anybody else, but even if that's so, she has the surprising conclusion, even if the fetus is a person, the woman should still have a right to an abortion. It is not wrong to have an abortion and it should be legally protected, she says, even if the fetus is a person. Okay, so how does she argue for this? And a question I want you guys to keep in mind, we won't really get to this till next lecture, but how is this going to refute what Marquis says? Like Marquis says, well, look, personhood doesn't matter, it's having a future like ours. Thomson doesn't really tackle that, but I want you to keep in mind, well, what would she say to that? But first, let's look at Thomson's basic argument. A lot of her argument rests on this violinist case. Violinist case, imagine you're kidnapped by, I forget, is it some society of music lovers or something? They kidnap you. I guess they knock you out first. You wake up. You are hooked up to this famous violinist, and you have to serve as a life support system for him. He's got some sort of condition. If you don't, he will die, right? So imagine these guys leave you unattended. Would it be morally okay to unhook yourself? Now, look, before we get into this, I think it's worth saying a little bit about the violinist case. And I think it's worth saying a little bit about some objections to it. So the violinist case is a bizarre case. It's just weird, right? It's also unrealistic, right? If you know anything about human biology and anatomy, just say, wait, how in the world is this supposed to work? What's wrong with this guy? What kind of life support system am I serving as? If it's a kidney that's went out, couldn't they just take a kidney out of me? Obviously, if it's a kidney, he's not going to get better. If you hook both of us together for 9 months, you're going to get all kinds of weird rejection issues if we share a blood supply forever. I'm not going to make that blood. Wouldn't that kill me? Yes, if you know anything about human anatomy and biology, which I'm not sure Thomson does, this is an unrealistic case. It is a weird case. I am a little bit uneasy with weird, unrealistic, bizarre hypotheticals like this. I'll just lay my cards on the table. But I think we should have some patience with Thomson. And I think we shouldn't rule out bizarre cases like this well without a hearing, right? Because I do think these cases can serve a purpose. And I do think the very weirdness of the case might in some ways be a point in its favor, right? I mean, think of it this way, right? All of you are going to have an opinion on abortion. And by that, I don't mean, oh, you're all going to be strongly pro-life or strongly pro-choice. Some of you might have opinions that are more moderate, abortion allowed in some specific cases, but not others. Some of you guys might just be like, well, I don't know what to make of this issue. It's incredibly complicated, right? All of those are opinions, though. We all have been exposed to this issue. We've all thought about it some. We've all probably got some views on it, right? Even if those views are just something like, good Lord, it's complicated. I don't know. Well, you don't, I'm going to guess, or you didn't, before you came into a philosophy class, have any opinion about this weird violinist case. It is bizarre and it is unfamiliar. And I do think that that can be a point in its favor, right? Look, we all have opinions about abortion, so let's take this weird case that we are completely fresh on, that none of us have a preconceived opinion about. None of us have a view or opinion we're going to go in trying to defend, and let's just think how we would react to this completely fresh, this completely new case. Serves the purpose of giving us some distance from this really controversial issue that we've all already got some set opinions on. So like I said, I do have some unease. Weird cases like this figure a lot in philosophy, especially a certain style of philosophy. And I'll be honest, I'm not crazy about that style of philosophy. Some of the guys I was making fun of in last lecture are very fond of it. It's not a style that I think is terribly helpful a lot of times. But I do think we should have some patience with Thomson's example. And I do think that there's a real purpose for the incredible weirdness of the example. So cases like this are sometimes called thought experiments. And think about a real world laboratory experiment. When you're doing it, you don't want things to be contaminated. You want the experiment to only reflect the things you're studying, right? If you're trying to see if some drug kills bacteria, you don't want, say, bleach or Lysol getting into your study and that killing the bacteria, because then you don't know what the action of the drug is and what's, say, bleach or Lysol, right? Same with thought experiments. We want to avoid contamination and keep thoughts about other issues out. And I think sometimes these weird cases are helpful to do that. Now look, you can go too far with weird cases. I do think we should be a little suspicious, but we'll leave that aside. Good reason to accept this, and I think we should accept Thomson's, abortion or violinist case and see what she can do with it. So the violinist case and abortion. So Thomson is going to ask us, does this case look like the case of abortion, and what would you do in this case? The violinist is an innocent person, and the fact he depends on you is through no fault of his own, right? The way Thomson sets this up, he's not some evil mastermind asking these guys to go out and do it. We can assume that maybe they've even kidnapped him too. Now that he's hooked up, of course, he doesn't want you to unhook him, but he didn't ask them to do it. He wasn't even given the chance to approve of it himself. So that seems analogous to the fetus. It's an innocent person in all senses of that term. So is the violinist. It has no role or fault in the situation it's in. So that much maybe seems like the case of abortion. Unplugging from the violinist results in his death, right? He needs you as a life support system. If you unhook, he is going to die. Thomson will say that is also like a case of abortion. The woman aborts, the fetus will die. What's more, like in the violinist case, the fetus needs the mother as a life support system, right? So Thomson will say, look, if you think that it is not wrong to unhook yourself, if you think it would be justified if you were to unhook yourself from this violinist, then you must admit that abortion is not wrong. You might think it would be really nice, really saintly, really wonderful if someone were to stay hooked up to this violinist. But if you thought that the person wasn't required to, that they had no duty to do it, that they would not be blameworthy for unhooking themselves, then I think Thomson's going to say you have to admit that it's not wrong for a woman to have an abortion because that's like unhooking. And think about it this way, right? Let's indulge Thomson's little fiction, right? Let's imagine that you were kidnapped and the police come in and they bust this all up. And when they save you, they say, no, 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 we're not going to unhook you. In fact, we're going to put people here to guard you for the next 8 months so you don't unhook yourself, right? And you say, well, my God, that's terrible. How can you do that? And the police say, well, yes, it's bad what's been done to you. It's bad the situation you're in. But if you unhook yourself, this guy dies. We can't let you do that. So we're going to keep watch on you forever, how long he needs to be hooked up. We're not going to let you unhook yourself. Thomson would say, and I think we agree with her, at least I do, that it would be wrong for the police, if you are in this situation, to keep you from unhooking, that you have every right to unhook and no one should stop you. If you think that's true, and you think the violinist case is like this, then you should also admit that women have a right to an abortion, they have a right to unhook themselves, and no one should stop them. All right, so this is a first pass at Thomson's violinist argument. Unhooking yourself from the violinist is like choosing to have an abortion. So if unhooking yourself from the violinist is morally permissible, then abortion also morally permissible. And if it would be wrong to stop someone from choosing to unhook themselves from the violinist, then it would be wrong to stop someone from having an abortion. Unhooking morally permissible, maybe not a nice thing to do, maybe not a wonderful thing, but it is not wrong to do it. We wouldn't blame anybody. Don't have a duty to stay hooked up. And it is wrong to stop anyone from unhooking themselves. Well, so abortion morally permissible, and it is wrong to stop anyone from having an abortion if they choose. Okay. So, how compelling is this argument? Well, I think it's open to an objection or maybe a series of related objections. So as I've presented this, and I think a natural way to read it is as an argument by analogy, right? And arguments by or from analogy only really work if the cases are alike in the relevant ways, right? This is the right thing to do in case A. Case B is like case A in the relevant ways, so it's also the right thing to do in case B. Well, that only works if the two cases are really alike, and are alike in the important ways. Well, is the violinist case really like a case of normal pregnancy in all the most important ways? Well, it's like it in some that, Thomson really kind of emphasizes and that we've looked at, but I'm not sure it's like it in every way. The violinist case actually differs from most pregnancies in a number of ways. And I think there are three important differences, with number 3 being perhaps the most important. So, the differences between the violinist case and, well, cases of pregnancy, all pregnancies in case 1, most in case 2, and a good many in case 3, right? The violinist is an adult. He is a grown person. Now, look, the fetus might not be anything, right? It might not be a person. Those debates get really hard really quickly. That's why Marquis turned away from the whole personhood question, right? But for the sake of argument, Thomson has granted the fetus is a child, is a person. Well, and if it is a person, what kind of person is it? It would be a child, is the most natural thing to say, right? Well, it seems that adults owe children more than they do other adults, right? If you see a guy wandering around and he's like, will you help me? I'm lost. And you are really late to something and you say, no, I'm sorry, man, I gotta go, I'm sorry. Not the nicest thing in the world. You haven't done anything wrong, right? If you see a 6-year-old wandering around and he's like, I'm lost, can you help me? You better help him even if you are going to be late to that meeting, unless you're just a terrible person, right? Adults owe children assistance in a way they don't owe other adults, right? That's just a general principle. I think it's a true one. So it seems like it might matter that if the fetus is in fact a person, it's a child. Another difference, the violinist is a complete stranger. You don't know this guy. You have no existing relationship with him. But, there might be exceptions in cases of surrogacy or whatever, but in most cases, the overwhelming majority, the fetus is biologically related to the mother. And again, we think that we owe relatives, especially, our children, things that we don't owe others. That Thomson does seem to be relevant here. 1 and 2, I'm not going to say a whole lot about. I'll touch on these in the next lecture. But 3 seems to be the biggest problem with this argument from analogy. I think you could say, look, by adding kidnapping into it, you, Thomson, of course, make it easy for us to say, oh, we should, unhook, no problem with that. But you also make it the case that this violinist case does not look like ordinary pregnancy, does not look like most pregnancy. In fact, the violinist case only looks like pregnancy in cases of rape. It's a huge, huge gap between your violinist case and most cases of pregnancy, we might say to Thomson. So look, if that's true, if it really only looks like pregnancy in cases of rape, I think we might say to Thomson, well, look, it's not that your argument hasn't shown anything. It really is like abortion in cases of rape. You might have shown that that is permissible, that that is okay, and why. Somebody like Marquis would say that it's wrong even in those cases. Maybe you have shown that that's not true. But what you haven't shown is that abortion is permissible more generally. Most pregnancy, the objection might say, doesn't look like this, and if that's so, the argument from analogy is just not going to work, Thomson. Well, look, I actually think all of this sells Thomson's argument a bit short. I don't think the best way to read what Thomson is up to here is as an argument from analogy, even though it might be tempting to read it that way at first. So in the next lecture, I want to take another pass at Thomson's argument. In fact, maybe dig more deeply into what's going on here, see if we can give her an argument that will deal with these objections.